fundamental part of life, an extremely important part of life, is what they call the attachment theory. Attachment theory is, I'm not sure that's 100% true, but it's an idea that I think is accurate in life, which is, attachment theory is you need to have someone specific, like a husband or a wife that you feel very close to, a need for love. It's definitely, we spoke about this in the past, is one of the 6 human needs is the need for love and connection. Now, there's 3 different basic ways you can connect. You can connect to others, you can connect to self, and you can connect to God. So I want to speak a little bit about the connection to God. A little bit. Just a little bit of a brief way of doing this. Now here's the thing. You can see the need to connect to God from your own soul. Hopefully a person realizes there's something inside of them that's not being fulfilled. But let's give you a source in the Torah. The Torah says the world stands on 3 things. It stands on Torah, on avoda, which means service of God. We'll talk about that in a second. Avoda. And kindness. Gemilus chasadim, kindness. Now, so it says the world stands on Torah, avoda, which means the service of God, and kindness, which means bestowing kindness on other people. That means that the world was created for the purpose of every individual getting these 3 inside of them. You need to have all 3. If you don't have these 3 in some degree, to the extent that you're missing Torah, or you're missing avoda, which is service of God, or you're missing kindness someplace in you, then you're not complete. The same way you need your heart, and you need your lungs, and you need your brain. You need all 3 of them. If you don't have any one of those things, you don't have your stomach, you can't function. It's the same thing over here. Now, Torah means learning Torah, the law of God. Kindness is pretty self-explanatory. You do kindness to yourself and to others, that's for sure. Yeah? Avoda is a little harder to understand, service of God. This is a little hard to understand. What does this mean? So, let's just do it like this. There are basically 3 columns. These are very fat columns, but nice and wide. But yeah, 3 columns. For anything to stand at all, you need to have a combination of 3 things. You need to have at least 3 legs. Like I say, we stand on 2 legs. But it's not exactly true. We don't stand on 2 legs, we stand on 2 surfaces. Your feet are actually a surface, right? Which means each one is like basically two little, it's a surface, right? Pretty clear, right? When you try to stand on 2, it doesn't really work. A person on stilts constantly has to move. You're walking on stilts because you can't stay still. Stability always comes with at least 3. 4, of course, is better, but 3 is the minimum. Now, in today's world, we have Torah. We have people learning. We also have kindness. Now, do we have people serving God? Yes, we do. But this column is split in half. Half of this column is, I'm not going to write it now, but half the column is the sacrifices that we once had in the temple. In the holy temple that existed twice, the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, is half of this. The other half is prayer. Now, picture the scene. Depending on whether you're a boy or a girl, it might be slightly different, but yeah. A boy that's taking his driving lessons, trying to get his license. So, at least in certain places in the United States, you have to take driver's education. So when you take driver's education, the whole time the instructor tells you have to put your hands at number 3 o'clock and and 9 o'clock, right? Or 2 and 10, right? First time you get your license, what do? 6, 12, right? Driving like that, 17, 18 years old, you feel very cool with your friends, right? Fantastic. Now, you had your license for 3 weeks. Everything's wonderful, right? But now, it's a snowstorm. There's ice on the ground, there's cross winds blowing 50 miles an hour, the car's going all over the place. You're holding, the first time in your life, you're holding your car at 2 and 10. 2 and 10 the first time since you're right? Fantastic. Now, who's in the car? Your entire family's in the car. Could be it's your husband and your kids. Could be since you got licensed, could be a little younger. Maybe it's your sister and her kids, whatever it is. There's a little baby in the back also. And the snow is coming down, the ice, the winds, it's terrible. So you're driving like this, 100% focused. And suddenly you remember, my brother borrowed the car last week. He had a flat tire, and he switched the tire from one of these nice thick tires to an emergency tire this big. Donut tire, it's much smaller, do not exceed 30 miles, 40 miles an hour, right? One of those things, right? An emergency tire. Now, you're hoping at that point that tire is giving its all for you and your family. Why? Because the other 3 tires are doing really great. But this one's tiny, very small. It's the limiting factor, okay? Today, we don't have the korbanos in the Beis HaMikdash. We don't have the sacrifices in the temple anymore. All you have is this column, the middle column is halfway. If everybody on the planet prays as much as they can pray, all you have is 50%. That's the maximum. So it's the third leg, which is the weakest of the three. So when you begin to pray in any form, it's very important to say to yourself, wait a second, I have to get this right. There are people praying, but if everyone prays together as best as we can, it's still only 50%. So you have to give it your all when you do it. That's the first thing. It's extremely important. Now, that's as far as the world goes. But yourself is even more so. In order to be effective, you have to have a balance. There's a famous book, everyone's heard this book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It was a hot thing about 20 years ago, but it's still very effective. So he talks about PPC, the PPC balance, production and production capability. How much am I actually producing? What am I making out there in the world? And how much am I capable of producing? You know, if you make your chicken lay eggs 2 or 3 times a day, eventually it doesn't lay eggs as well. Now, in order to be successful and happy as a person, you have to constantly have a flow of feeding your mind. Let's do this properly. These 3 are parallel to the 3 parts of a person. There's mind, there's heart, and there's body or possessions. I think it's 2 S's there. Whatever, okay, get the point. Now, Torah is mind. You have to challenge your mind, you have to develop your mind. Feed your mind. Our mind is being fed on a regular basis, positive and negative all day long. It happens all the time. So if I don't feed my mind with things that are positive, then eventually my mind gets filled with things that are negative and it breaks me down, breaks down my mind. Avoda is done with the heart. To pray, to have a relationship, to talk to God is all about the heart. I can have my mind, and I need to use my mind, but if I use only my mind, then my relationship with God will be robotic. It will be at best maybe like a slave. It won't be like a relationship of love. It won't be real. Every relationship where you really want to do something, where you really want it to be alive, you have to have heart. You have to have emotions in there, otherwise it doesn't work. And of course, kindness, I can do kindness with my body, and I can do kindness with my possessions. You can even do kindness with speech. That's also there as well, right? Now, if my mind is not being taken care of, even my heart is, then it's no good. If my heart is being taken care of and my mind isn't, the other way around, no good. I need to have all 3 of these. Now, here's the thing. My personal opinion, could be this is wrong, that in Western society is, this is totally acceptable, and this is totally acceptable. To be doing things with your body and your possessions and maybe even your speech is fine. To develop your mind is fine. But if you people speak about developing their heart, they're seen as a little bit flaky sometimes. In business, for sure, this is necessary, but it's not openly discussed. Yeah? You don't go to a person and say, listen, I know my product is a little more expensive, but I'm really addressing your heart when I do this. The truth is, the people that are successful actually do this, but they don't make it open. For some reason, it's not the case. Now, my theory is the following, that the current gullus that we're in, the exile that we're in, is based on Esau, I think they say in English. The Medrash tells us, the Torah tells us that when he died, something rather miraculous happened. It's not a casual thing. He was a tremendous mind. But what happened to him was his mind was so disconnected from the rest of himself, from his heart and the rest of him, his mind knew what the right thing was to do, but it was hard to implement it. So when he died, his head was separated from his body, and his head miraculously rolled and was buried with the forefathers, with Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. He had the mind of a giant, but he couldn't implement it into the rest of him. There was a disconnect between the mind and the heart. Because there's a disconnect between the mind and the heart, my opinion is, come on, perfect timing, yeah? Because that's the case, this part is difficult for us. We're in the same exile as Asaph. So this part is hard for us. It's not as accepted as much. So when people speak about developing the heart and developing the heart, the emotions, it's seen as flaky, it's seen as weird, but it's not really openly accepted. And maybe even we're a little bit underdeveloped in this area. So it seems to me one of the reasons why prayer is so difficult is because it's harder for us to access the heart. I'll say another reason why prayer is difficult. Because besides the fact you can't see God, you can't touch Him, you can't hear Him, you can't feel Him, it's not as concrete as we're used to it being in other situations, right? But in addition to that, it requires a regular investment of the heart. Like, sometimes when you listen to music, that maybe affects your heart in a certain way. But you listen to it when you want. If you had to have set times to listen to music, it would be much more difficult. So this brings us into a very fundamental idea about what relationships are. Prayer really is a question of relating to God. A relationship is even when you don't feel like it. It's even when, I don't feel like it, I'm not interested. No, that's, it's a question of giving. It's not just a question of taking. That's what a relationship is. So that's hard to say, okay, I have to daven, I have to pray at a certain time in the morning, in the afternoon, in the night, at certain fixed times. How do I get my heart involved in that? Well, when I think about myself, it's hard to do it. If I think about what does he need, in this case, it's God. Of course, God doesn't need anything, but what does he want? What would make him happy, so to speak? Yeah? He wants me to speak to him. I'm thinking about what he wants. I care about him. Then I can get out of myself and it's easier to pray. Much easier. Like, what do you want? I want to give you nachas. I want to make you happy. I'll give you an example of what I mean to make it a little more real. Sometimes it happens in marriage where there's a lot of marriage difficulties. The husband and wife are fighting. Usually that happens because each one is thinking, what are you giving me? What are you giving me? But it happens that circumstances change. Sometimes it's a car accident, God forbid, or something else, a sickness, God forbid. And all of a sudden, the spouses start thinking about each other instead of thinking about themselves. And then the marriage changes, it becomes better. It often happens that when there's a sickness in a marriage, chas v'shalom, shouldn't happen, yeah? Very often, like when there's a lot of machlokas before, a lot of fighting, it stops. Because now, I care about you, I'm thinking about you, what do you need? You're in the hospital, you're sick, you're scared, you're worried. Or the person who's sick says, I don't want you to lose your spouse. I feel bad about, what are you going to do when I die? I feel bad. They start worrying about, and all of a sudden the marriage becomes better. So prayer is the same way. When you want prayer to be better, you have to activate your heart by thinking, what does Hashem want? What does God want? How can I make him happy? What has he done for me? And what can I possibly do for him? When you wake up the heart a little bit, everything changes. Everything changes. Now,